Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today. Really appreciate this. We're hoping it's going to be a fascinating discussion, as every time I get to speak with Pete, it's fascinating. Thank you, Pete, for being here. This is Pete Simon. I'll let him introduce a little bit more about himself, but what I know is I have the pleasure of working with him at the Kuleana co-working space at Copley Grove, and also at the Kuleana AI Lab. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what that lab is and what we do there. But more generally, we're here today to talk about AI for Kauai businesses. And perhaps you all have many questions. So I invite you at any time to step up to the mic and ask those questions. This presentation will be a question and answer format. So I have a set of questions for Pete. He'll be graciously answering them. And at any time, if you have a question, please step up to the mic and interrupt us. We will include it into the presentation. We will also have some time at the end for extra questions and to speak directly with Pete. My name is Jennifer Jones-Patulli. I'm a board member with the Louis Business Association. Also, full disclosure, I'm a board member with Kuleana Co-working, so I get to work alongside Pete at the co-work space. Before I go any further, are you ready? Yes. Technical support. Let's test that mic, Pete.
Technology guru.
Yes, he's the man. All right, Pete Simon, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
I know how to use microphones. Turn them on. So my background, my tech background is in something called human-computer interaction. That's what my master's work was in. And basically that's helping people understand computers and websites and apps and other digital technology. I say that when I go to work for companies, it's to help them be less awful online. My job is part design, part research, and part strategy. So I've been doing that for the last 25 years. Before that, I worked for the casinos in the Midwest. I was a surveillance instructor, helping people catch cheaters and understand how people were cheating. I was a private investigator. When I first came to Hawaii back in 1994, I was a sub-teacher. So I taught the classroom. My path is kind of winding all the way up to this point. Now, I work for a Fortune 5 healthcare company where I help them understand artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, and I help them be less awful online.
Yeah. And certainly, I'm sure if you could pull out one theme from that winding path, I'm sure it's going to be something fascinating. And I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you because I know how fascinating you are, but they don't yet.
So one thing about the entire winding path that I just described is it has to do with people interacting and watching and understanding patterns. When I was in the classroom managing students and teaching them about biology, certainly there was some understanding about how people behave, how kids behave, how they learn, how to draw their attention. And then when I went to work for the casinos, that was my entire job, understanding how people were, what their behavior was. And that followed in when I started working as a detective. And then when I finally decided that working for the casino was like working for the Empire in Star Wars, and I wanted to do something different with my life, go into tech, it was a natural progression because in technology, I worked as a developer for a while, but then very soon after, I got into this human-computer interactions, design and research about how people were using it or not using it, what their problems were. And all of the lessons that I had learned in all my crazy disparate jobs were perfect, right? Working in a casino is perfect for understanding how humans interact, the way that the place is set up. It's kind of like Costco. It's very, very well designed to bring you through an experience that way. And it was a great lesson. Learning how people interact with each other, why they're in a particular space, all of that is very transferable over to helping them and helping companies understand how they're using the technology or how to use it better.
Thank you, Pete. Quick sound check. Is everyone hearing us okay? Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. More volume? Okay. A little bit closer as well. Excellent. Thank you for that. And so human-computer interaction. I love this. I love that intersection. And I want to hear a little bit more about the consulting work you do on Island and how that comes into it. And we're going to pause here because I'm going to ask you a little bit about Kuleana Co-working and the AI Lab as we lead in. But before that, just a little bit about your consulting work.
So in a nutshell, I help businesses and organizations understand how to use technology, specifically generative AI. There's a lot of interest out there now on how to use this, how it might fit into the work that businesses or organizations on the island are doing, how they can work with their employees to use this technology. And my consulting runs the gamut. Almost everyone who comes and talks to me is at a sort of an entry level. I have very few super knowledgeable people that I work with. Everyone is sort of in that same basket, and I help bring them along, help them understand not only the basics of the technology, but also how it can be used in their particular situation. And that's not only improving the quality of the work that they do, saving them time is a big deal, but also helping them understand how to recognize hype and how to navigate around some of the stickier parts of using the technology. But yeah, usually it's an hour session. Usually it's done at our location at the co-working space, but I have gone out to other people's place of business and helped them there.
Excellent. And just tell us a little bit about the co-working space and how the AI lab is different.
Sure. So Kuleana.work is a co-working space, the first co-working space on the island that we opened way back in 2018, back when hot coffee was run by Jeff Adams and it was on Rice Street, tucked in there. We opened up the co-working space next door to that. And we've been in operation ever since then. We've changed locations. Right at the beginning of lockdown, we moved to the mall, and we were at our second location where I think the hot tub place is now. And then just a few months ago, we were fortunate to have an opportunity come in front of us where we had a new, more exciting, more built out space over on the other side where the First Hawaiian Bank is. So that's the co-working space. And if you're not familiar with co-working, it's if you could work from anywhere, if you don't need to go to a place every day, but you can choose where you work from. Some people come to the co-working space, they pay a fee like a gym membership, and they work from there. And it's like this cool, chill lounge with all the things, the printer, the amazing internet, everything you would need to do the normal course of business. The AI lab is something that we opened up late last year, in part due to a grant that we got from the county for technology and innovation. We recognize this need on the island for not only helping people understand the technology, but understanding how the people of Kauai could use it or weren't using it, right? No one, as far as we could tell, was asking the people of Kauai or most places in the island how this technology might apply to them or how they're using it or how they're not using it. And so we decided that that was a need we wanted to serve. And so we decided to put together a lab. And when I mean lab, I don't mean lab coats and Bunsen burners. I mean a group of people doing research, providing education, and doing development. So we do research. We talk to different groups of people on the island, whether it's teachers or business owners or people who are transitioning from one job to the next. And we develop this understanding how they're using the technology or not, what their fears are as far as AI goes, or what their aspirations are. We put it all together and we publish that, and that's on our website. So we make that research available. And then we take what we learn and we teach. We have workshops. We do consulting, as we talked about. We have office hours during the week where anybody can come in and we can talk about your questions or concerns or things that you want to know if you want to learn something in particular. And so we educate. And then finally, we do development. Most of the time when you're using this AI technology, you're typing into a web browser and the AI is somewhere not local, right? It's somewhere in the cloud, somewhere on the mainland or somewhere else in the world. What we're doing is we're building a local AI model that's stored in the computer that we have at the space. And that's interesting for a number of reasons. One, because as far as we know, there are no local models in the state of Hawaii that have been trained specifically with information that's relevant to the people of the islands. And so that's one of our goals. Another goal is to learn how to do this because for businesses who are concerned about putting their information into the cloud or who are concerned about talking with AI about their particular problems, their particular challenges, if you have a local model, then that doesn't go anywhere. You control that. It doesn't go out on the web. It doesn't go to some other company's servers. It stays right in your house. And so those are the things that we do as far as the lab goes. So the lab is a program that uses the co-working space as sort of a platform.
Excellent. Thank you. And so we're probably wondering now, how do you define AI? Can you get a little bit more specific about what you mean when you're talking about this technology?
Sure. So as I'm sure some of you know, AI is not new. right? It's been around for decades in different forms. The more common, older version of the technology, earlier version of technology is called machine learning. And there's a couple other different names for it, but was mostly algorithms and sensing patterns from very large bodies of data. I'm making great oversimplifications here. But the AI that's popular the last couple of years, that's called generative AI. And when I say AI, what I mean is a digital system that can interact with you through conversation, whether you're typing or speaking, and it can learn as it goes. It remembers, it understands, it can correct, and it can make better choices going on based on performance of what it's done in the past. And all of the different models that are available now, when I say model, I mean app or versions of AI. ChatGPT is a model. Gemini is a model put out by Google. Claude is a very good model put out by a company called Anthropic. These different models, don't want to go down the rabbit hole. I answered the question.
Okay. All right. Well, so there are lots of models. There are lots of things to talk about there. And defining AI is so important because there is a lot of confusion right now. And if you can give people 3 things to remember to stay clear-headed in the confusion, what would that be as they're thinking about what is AI? Just summarizing 3 things that they should know so they keep their head clear.
Just so I understand the question, 3 things that people should keep in their head when they're understanding what AI is?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, it's a tool. Something that can be used like a hammer, right? A hammer's got lots of different uses. It can do damage if you use a hammer on somebody's head, but it can also be very helpful as far as your productivity when you're building something. AI is the same way. AI can be used in ways that are not helpful for society, but also has an amazing potential to do good. Another thing that I would keep in mind right at the beginning is it may seem hard, it may seem daunting, you may have this idea that you could never become very good at it because it's so complex. I was just talking in the back of the room before we started here. A year and a half ago, I knew less about how to use generative AI than anyone in this room right now. I promise you that's true. I didn't know anything about it. Like I was vaguely aware that it was going on, but I didn't understand it. That was a year and a half ago. It is not hard to learn. And then the third thing, I think as you start interacting with it, you start using it, maybe you'll leave right now if you've never used it, and later today you'll call up chatgpt.com and you'll start typing a few things in and you'll be blown away by the interaction. The third thing that I want you to know is that you've already taken the hardest step, going from nothing at all or a very cursory using it like Google to going back and forth, having just the smallest conversation that will open up worlds for you. And that's like, if there was just one thing, that would be the thing that I would want you to take away.
Thank you, Pete. And of course, we're here because we're fascinating business people doing great work. And we probably want to know a few things about, well, how does this apply to Kauai businesses? How do we take this and use it to do good and to do things faster, better, more productive, and maybe take some load off our shoulders?
Sure. So on the table, there's a printout of a white paper that we did. But what I'm going to focus on is that other thing, that little mini poster. This is sort of like the summary of the latest research effort that we have in flight, where we talk to small business owners on Kauai. And those are the high points. Certainly in the report, when we publish it, hopefully next week, there'll be a lot more detail. But on that poster, you'll see 4 points that come out more than any other thing as far as what's important or what's relevant to the businesses on Kauai. And as far as general application, I would say that using AI to save time seems to be the number one use, the number one value proposition. Different businesses and different individuals, of course, have different needs. Just like, different people would use a hammer for something different. But I would say if there was one common thread with the small businesses that I've consulted with so far, it's to save time. I talked with a business owner who spent 6-7 hours a week doing the schedule for their food operation. And I taught them using generative AI how to make that happen. The first time, he spent a half hour setting it up. And then after that, it was maybe 5 minutes. It's an enormous time saving. And so that's where I would go.
Yeah, I see the 4 quadrants right here on this handout. So you just referenced saving time. So business application can use AI to save time. But there's some other things, competitive edge, trust barriers, can't replace human touch. Can you tell me about the other three quadrants?
Sure. Let's talk about competition. So some of you have probably used AI in some capacity, if only as an up-jumped search engine, but others have had a little bit more interaction. For those of you who have not, I'm going to step through a pretty simple interaction that you can have. So you can ask questions and get answers from the AI. And if you're a business owner and you want to find out about your competition, here's something that you can do. You can type into the box, say, I do this kind of business on Kauai. Tell me who my competitors are. And it will list your competitors. And then you say, well, I'm interested in this competitor. What I want you to do is go to TripAdvisor, Google Reviews, and Yelp. Read all of the reviews for that competitor, and then give me a sentiment analysis. Tell me how people feel about it, and tell me places of opportunity that they're not addressing that maybe I can use in my business. And I promise you it'll do that. That's one.
That's amazing.
Easy
So
trick.
first, time saving. The example that you gave, scheduling, employee scheduling, which took this business owner 4 hours. You got it down to 15 minutes. And then you're talking about competitive edge, and you're saying, oh, I can just go on whichever model, and we'll talk about models in a second, and I can go search all my competitors. Then I can get them to do a sentiment analysis and figure out how the feelings are about it. And then I could then do what? Like, that's amazing.
Whatever you want. And I mean, so you could do this for your own business as well. You could say, I run this business, check TripAdvisor, Google, and Yelp, and tell me what my customers are saying. Because I understand that as a business owner, if you read your own reviews, that's the path to madness, right? Like you'll go crazy. But you can have the AI do that and give you an unbiased report about what people are saying. And when I say sentiment analysis, that's just my term. There's no, let me walk that back a little bit. There's no right or wrong way to enter in these words to speak to the AI. I think we all grew up using computer applications like Microsoft Word or Adobe Illustrator or whatever you happen to learn how to use. And learning how to use it, especially if it's complex, it's hard, right? There's particular ways that each of these programs need to be sort of massaged to give you results. Generative AI is not like that. There is no right or wrong way. There's certainly ways that you can phrase things that might bring about better results. Just like if you're talking with another human being, you could say, hey, go do this thing. Or you could be a little bit more precise, a little bit more calm down, match the mood of the person, and you'll get better results. That works. But there's no right or wrong way. Just ask it what you're looking for. I say sentiment analysis. You just tell me what people are thinking, and it'll provide you the same results. Whatever works for you, however you would normally speak, the model, the large language model that you're interacting with is designed to understand how normal people talk.
I love that. I have two questions at the same time because this is a quadrant. We've talked about two of the squares, so I have not forgotten of the last two. But I do notice the last two is more about maybe some challenges. So when we're thinking about using this for small business, there might be something that people need to know about can't replace humans or trust barriers. Can you just speak to those for just a second?
Sure. And the two are kind of related together. Maybe I can knock both of them out with one sort of explanation. So we've all heard that AI can be wrong. AI can lie to you. That's called hallucination. That's just like talking with people, right? I talk with people who are wrong all the time at my day job. They're good people, mostly honest, but wrong. AI technology has no special quality that it can never be wrong. So there always needs to be this checking, this human in the loop. When you get something back from AI, if the answer really matters, if it's something that can be fact-checked, it should be fact-checked. This report that you have on your table, we put out about the small business landscape using AI in Hawaii. We spent more time fact-checking that, making sure that the information that AI gave us when we were putting that report together than we did putting together the report. It's so important because we have this expectation that because we see it on a screen, it must be true. Even though rationally we know that that's not the case, day to day, moment by moment, when we're typing things out, we act as if it is. And when you're talking back and forth, when you're having a conversation, when you're using something called a conversational user interface, which is a fancy way of saying I was typing to it or I was speaking to it, your brain slips into a different mode. It's not like you're pinching and swiping or using your mouse or a keyboard. When you're actually conversing back and forth, even if it's with a computer system, you think about things differently. And you believe what you hear more often, even if you try harder to be sort of rational and skeptical. So it pays to take care. So those two things are related. It's essential to keep your critical thinking or your employees' critical thinking as part of what's going on. Never ever just take something that an AI system gives you and put it out there as your own words or as your own material, because that is going to come back and bite you in the rear end. And then as far as trust goes, it goes beyond just trusting the veracity of the information, right? In my consulting with businesses on the island, in my giving workshops to the community, I have never experienced more emotion with the technology than I do with AI. People have a lot of thoughts, right? So it just so happens this past Saturday, the AI Lab had a launch event, and we were on the front page of the Garden Island on Monday. One of our board members texted me, "You got to go get a copy." And so I went over to Times to get a copy, and I just happened to be getting there as this older woman was showing up and looking at the paper, reading the headline. And the headline said something like, "What is AI?" And it had a picture of the door to our lab. And she goes, "Oh, God help us all." And she walked away. And I thought if I'd been like 5 seconds quicker on the uptake, I would have asked her about it. But just there's a lot of emotion around this technology, whether you feel that or not, or your employees might have opinions that it's going to destroy the world or take all of our jobs or change society. I think that last one is probably a little bit more likely. But regardless, whether it's seated in a lot of research or just based on what they've heard or what they've gathered from society, a lot of people have some pretty deep feelings about this technology. So when you start to engage with it, it's important to recognize that and to deal with that, because a lot of people don't trust the technology. A question I get asked all the time in workshops, well, how do I know what the AI says is true? And I turn that around and I say, you have the same challenge when you're talking to anyone, when you're looking anything else up online using Google or Wikipedia or any source of information. You as the human have, sort of a job to do as far as making sure that this information is accurate for what I want to do.
I love that. So there's so much there for businesses in general, and specifically on Kauai, because we do have a lot of fear and a lot of concern about how this technology will affect us and what this means to our businesses and our communities. How do we keep what makes us human? How do we keep what makes Kauai Kauai? And how do we incorporate this into our work life in a way that we use this tool for good, not for evil or for bad, or it doesn't use us? You also talk about, you mentioned a hammer, and I know you have an example you use in the workshops about you can't talk to a hammer. Can you just say that quickly for everyone here in the room, just to remind
Sure.
people?
So what I say in the workshops is this is the first tool any of us, the AI, the generative AI, the first tool that any of us will genuinely be able to talk to, right? It's not alive. It's not a human being, but you can still talk to it. Like I can't talk to the hammer. Somebody will say, well, you can talk to Alexa. Like kinda, right? If you have any experience with Alexa, Alexa doesn't remember the conversation, right? I can say, Alexa, tell me about Prince Kuhio. And it'll tell me a bunch of things about Prince Kuhio. And I say, I'm curious, what color were his eyes? Alexa will have no idea who I'm talking about because it doesn't remember what we just talked about. It has no sense of state, no sense of conversation. All of the AI models out there have a sense of state and conversation. So you can go back and forth. Oh, this one thing that we talked about, do you remember this? And it's going to say, of course I remember this. So it's going to be just like talking to people. So the value, the insight there is, if you're ever wondering how AI can help you, you should just ask it. You say, I run a business. I do this thing. I know nothing about AI, but I'm interested in learning. Can you tell me 3 things that an AI system can do to help me? You will be blown away by what the response is. And when you get the response, you can say, tell me a little bit more about this. And it will. Or if it tells you something that you don't understand or that you're taking exception at, say that. Say, I don't understand this, and it'll re-explain it. Sometimes it'll make a mistake. Sometimes, like we talked about, it'll hallucinate or say something crazy. Call it on it. Like, I don't think that's true. I've been doing this for 20 years. This seems wrong. It'll respond. It'll either fact check or it'll apologize. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. There's another story that I really love that you tell quite often. It's the buzzing story. And I think this is not just for businesses, but community members and everyone sitting in a room wondering, what is that sound? Can you tell us that story quickly?
Sure. I apologize. Some of you have heard the story, but it's a pretty good story when it comes to AI. So in our second location as a co-working space, we were at the mall, and my day starts pretty early. I think it was around 4:30 in the morning a couple of years ago, right when I first started understanding how this technology works. I was by myself in the co-working space, and I just became aware of this buzzing coming from the back room, like where the employees come in. I thought, well, maybe this has always been going on. Maybe it's new now. I went and looked, and there's electrical equipment. I know a lot about technology, but I don't know anything about electrical equipment. I had no idea if it was about to explode or if everything was fine. I just started using generative AI, and I thought, what could the harm be? So I take a picture, and I go back, and I start typing. First, I give it a little context. I say, it's 4:30 in the morning. I'm at the mall in Lihue on the island of Kauai. And there's this buzzing sound that maybe it was here the entire time. Maybe I'm just aware of it now. Am I in any danger? And I uploaded the picture. And the response I got blew me away. It said, well, that looks like it's this blah, 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 blah piece of equipment. And normally it makes a humming sound. I don't think you're in any danger. But if you open up the panel, and in the picture, you could clearly see there was like a little panel with a latch. If you open up the panel and take a picture of the inside, I can give you a better answer. So I go with my camera, I open up the panel, I take a picture, and I upload it to that same conversation. It said, oh yeah, that's this blah, 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 blah. That buzzing sound is completely normal. As you can see, it was inspected just a couple months ago. And sure enough, that date was on the picture of the inspection stamp on the inside of it. And it says, you're probably fine. I thought, okay, I just learned a few things today. I understand now that I'm safe when that piece of technology is buzzing. I didn't recognize it. But also that I can use generative AI in a lot of different ways that I hadn't realized. You can take a picture of the inside of your 1984 Ford Escort and say, there's a thumping sound. What might it be? And it will probably tell you. I've heard stories like that. You can take a picture of a bird or a plant. Your flower's not doing quite as well. You take a picture of that and say, it's not doing well. What do you think the problem is? And it will probably tell you and give a course of action. You can interact with these things not only by what you're saying, but images and video as well.
It's amazing. It's quite a powerful tool, and probably more powerful than we're used to having. And once again, thinking about the business community and thinking about competitive advantage, thinking about the ways to stay safe using it, the ways to make sure it's not hallucinating, and all of those different things that you mentioned, so valuable. And I want to back up a little bit, because you also said the word model many times. And people might be wondering, when you say model, you told us what you mean by it, but there's also many models. So two questions embedded in this. One is, what are the types of models that you've been using and that you're teaching people to use through the consulting and the workshops that you do? And the second part of that question is, what do you recommend as a good model to learn with?
Okay, so a model is like an app. A model is the AI version that you happen to be working with. ChatGPT is a type of model. If you've ever gone to OpenAI's website or chatgpt.com, you'll see a web interface that lets you interact with the model. And up in the top left-hand corner, there's a drop-down where you see, oh, there's all these different choices. I can go to something called 4 or 4.0 or O1 or O3 mini. And it doesn't mean a lot to most people. For almost everything you do, whatever it says by default when you get there is just fine. But know that as you get better and better, if you get more used to working with it, if you understand your needs and its capabilities a little bit more, there are different models that are better for different types of work. But in general, all of them are the same. So when I say different models, different apps, what I'm talking about, you'll hear me say ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Grok or DeepSeek. These all might be names that you've heard in the news. These are all versions of AI. put out by different companies or different organizations. So OpenAI is the name of the company that makes ChatGPT. That's the most common model. So ChatGPT has about 88% of the use market share of all generative AI, including the ones that generate images and videos and music and things like that. Then there's Gemini and Claude, which are like the close runners behind. And it seems like every week, those three companies come out with new features that puts their model just a little bit further ahead. But when I recommend people just learning, I say you should go to OpenAI's ChatGPT, only because there's so much material out there about it. There's less material about how to use Gemini, less material about how to use Claude. So if they're all pretty close, you should use the one that there's more material about so you can learn a little bit easier. You can ask questions and have more focused answers coming back. But yeah, when I say model, I know I slip into that a lot. I'm just talking about different versions of AI put out by different companies.
Excellent. And I have a bonus question for you. Many people might be noticing, if you use Gmail, you might have noticed Gemini getting added to your suite of things. You might be using Microsoft and have noticed Copilot is now everywhere. What do people do with that?
Ignore it. No. Yeah, so you may have noticed AI is a hot topic in some circles. And companies, in their rush to provide value, in their rush to be seen as very technologically forward and thinking about how this might go, have sprinkled AI into a lot of the spaces that you're used to inhabiting. Right? It seems like any major software package that you're used to dealing with, whether it's Google Workspaces, any of the Microsoft Office projects, have some of their AI sprinkled all over the place. So Microsoft's primary AI is called Copilot. And you'll see Copilot in Bing all throughout the Office projects or Office products. And like Jen said, anything Google related will have Gemini sprinkled in there. Using it is just as helpful or valid a use case as it might be for your business, right? It might say, hey, do you want me to help you write this thing that you seem to be writing? I tend not to use those tools. For me, they get in the way. They're not. I haven't come across ones that are particularly well designed for what I use it for. So I tend to use AI just on the separate interface where I can talk back and forth with it and give it clarity. Every now and then I'll use it inline, but I think the inline stuff where it looks at what you're doing, whether it's a letter you're writing or a diagram that you're designing, a flow that you're working with, it's good, but it's not, in my experience, great yet. And so I tend to shy away from the AI that seems to be embedded inside all these applications. But yeah, you'll see more and more of that, right? Because it seems like the bigger businesses, the bigger tech companies, they feel like they're winning when they tell you about how many ways they've incorporated AI into the stuff that they have.
That's so helpful because if you're like me, you get inundated by emails. If you're in the business community, everybody's trying to sell you AI right now. And then you get all these things that you already use, and now there's AI features attached to them. So on one hand, you're embracing and helping people use AI, and you're talking about using ChatGPT and other models that would be helpful. And then you're also suggesting that maybe some of the ones that are embedded might not be as helpful. So how would a business person decide in their busy day, like what to turn off, what to turn on, and turn off, turn on seems to be a bit reductionist on my part. But what would you say to that in terms
I
of
wish there was an easy answer for that. And I would say, just like you do with any other tool, right? Try it out. You hear about this new bookkeeping tool, this new presentation tool, whatever your normal process is for trying it out and evaluating it, give it a spin and see if it works for you. I'm sorry that there isn't an easier, more clear rubric to decide whether you're going to steer away from it for now or to embrace it. But I'd say try it. I guess that underscores just the entire technology, right? I wouldn't shy away from it on general principles. I wouldn't shy away from it thinking that you'll never be able to learn how to use it or that you're not that technical so you can't really derive any value of it. That's just not true. But there is no easy way to say this is good, this is not good. You just have to try it and see.
Wonderfully said. And I have received that question several times too. So it really is important for people to know if they're going to use it, not to be intimidated by it, but to try it out. And also, this is why we have the lab, to help people through these questions. And we'll follow up on how people can learn more. But you also, in your stories, you've interacted with this buzzing thing in the co-work space at 4:30 in the morning. There probably was a method to how you interacted with the model. There probably were a series of prompts that you decided to use. And for people that are not already using prompts, can you say a little bit about prompts, what they are, and how you would use them to get better results?
Sure. So a prompt is just a fancy way of describing input that goes to the AI to get a response back. So you saying, good morning, what's the weather like in Lihue today? That's a prompt. You're prompting for the weather in Lihue. And prompts can get more complex. They can be casual and fun. They can be deadly serious. They're all over the place. And then as far as how to do prompting better, there's, on the one hand, I know earlier I said you just use natural language and just speak like you would to a bright graduate student or a newly hired assistant that's showing promise. That's all you need. But there are strategies, ways that you can word what you say that gives better results. And some of it is sort of like when you think about it, oh yeah. So one thing would be if you ask it a question about your business or about your competitor or about part of what you do, at the end you could say, and please double check your answer and make sure that it's truthful or make sure that it's accurate. Your incident of hallucination will go way down. So that's what I mean when I say, you can ask for things in any way that makes sense, but there are certain ways that you can ask that can make it better. You can say, an example that I give for people as far as something called context, like why you're asking or the kind of response that you want. I use this example. So if a family, let's say a dad was planning a trip to Mexico for their family, you could use the AI for that. You could say, I'm planning a trip to Mexico with my family. Tell me what I should do. And it'll give you answers. But the thing is, when the guy typed that in, he didn't say anything about his family. He didn't say when he was going. He didn't say what the kids liked, what kids didn't like. And so the answer is sort of general, right? If you add context, if you say, I'm this person, my wife is this person, my kids are this age. My kids love dinosaurs and they hate high up things and explosions or loud noises. We're going in May and we're going to fly down. What would you recommend? Your answers will be much, much better. And the same thing applies if you're asking questions about your business. If you're doing research into competitors or how you can do this thing more efficiently or what new resources are out there, the more background, the more context you can give when you're having a conversation, the better your answers will be.
I love that. You talked about context. Did you also talk about role at all? Giving it a role?
I didn't. So another interesting, fun, scary thing you can do with any of these models is you can give it a role. So in a particular conversation, you can say, act as a skeptical, rational, harsh critic. I'm going to bounce an idea off you. And it will do that. Like sort of the default persona, if you don't tell it to act this way or that way, the default persona for most of these models is pretty chill, pretty docile, pretty submissive and friendly. But you can cast it in a role. You can say, you are a cranky college professor who never liked any of my work. I'm going to present an idea to you. Please tell me what you think about it. And it'll adopt that role. You can say, you are an expert product manager. I'm going to describe this idea I have for a new product or a new process. What do you think? When you cast it into a role, what you're doing is you're taking its capability to go into all of its training data, this amazing pile of information that it has about everything that's ever been digitized. And you're narrowing it down so that it can focus and give better answers. So if you say, you are an expert entrepreneur in the food industry, specializing in food carts, what you've done is you've narrowed its focus down. So however it's going to be listening to you and however it's going to be answering, it's going to be through that lens. So when we say role or role casting, that's what we mean. It can dramatically raise the quality of the inputs that you get. And then if you want it to change, then you say, okay, you're no longer that person. Now you're this person. Or thank you for acting like that person. Now just revert back to the normal you.
Excellent. I see a question. Would you like to step up to the mic so we can hear you?
Aloha Kako. Big fan of Gen AI. I've been using it since December 22. I use it in all my daily workflows. You were just talking about structuring your prompts. Gen AI, the LLMs lack interpretability in general for AI, but one of the other things you could do, I'd like you to talk about, is ask it to explain its reasoning as it goes on, to break it down into small steps. You can get close to interpretability that way.
It's a really good point, and I appreciate the question. Whenever I speak to a general group, I understand that there's a variety of levels of familiarity and savvy. And it turns out most of the time when I talk to a new group of people, most people in the group are at the, I've used it like Google a couple times. And so almost always I don't stray into strategies like that. But one of the things that you can do, the gentleman brought up, was you can ask it to cite its sources. You can say, present your answer step by step and tell me where you got that information from, and it'll do it. And odds are it'll give you a better answer. So if you're methodical about, especially about big asks or complicated asks, you can get much better responses from all of the models if you structure your question as you mentioned.
I'm really curious to put you on the spot here for a second, because that was a great question. And I wonder, for kawaii businesses, what would be an example of when they would ask for the model to show its work or to show its reasoning? You can take 5 minutes to think about that.
Well, I think anything, and this is just off the top of my head, right? I think if you're having a conversation that's about strategy, where you want to take your business, or a decision that's meaningful, that will have real consequences, then that's certainly an occasion where you would want it to show its work, right? And there are some models, some versions of AI out there that do this naturally. There's one called Perplexity, which usually cites its work. Google is getting better about citing its work. But now anytime that you ask, I have this question, you're going to give me an answer, and please cite your sources, it will tell you. Not all of them before could do that back in the day when we first started doing it, but now they're all capable of doing it. You have to check all of those sources, because one of the more common forms of hallucination, especially if your prompt is kind of general, is in the citations. In that report that we printed out and put on your table as an example, which is also available on our website, there are a lot of citations. And part of the due diligence we did was we ran down each of them. And there was one reference in particular where it mentioned that a conversation was happening in Honolulu about innovation in AI. But when we went to the website, it mentioned that a conversation was happening, but it didn't say it was happening in Honolulu. So we thought, well, maybe there was some other source of information in its trading data that said Honolulu. So we looked as hard as we could, and we could not find any reference to that conversation happening at this meeting in Honolulu. So we took it out, right? If we can't back it up, then we wouldn't want it to be part of a report that we put out. And I would say if you're making critical decisions based on the information that you're getting, that's when you want to check.
I love that, because now small business owners have a lot at their fingertips, and they have a lot of capabilities they didn't have before to ask some amazing questions, to give ChatGPT, for example, a role, a context, and maybe get some amazing strategy, have a little bit of a conversation with ChatGPT about it. I know that there's another question that's been coming up in people's minds about privacy and security. So we didn't talk about this before, but I'd love to just take a moment. If you're adding all of this information into the chat, at what point should you be, that's something I shouldn't share, and that's okay to share? What would be my decision making as a user around what to share and what not to share when I'm using ChatGPT in these ways?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that one either, unfortunately. So we're no strangers to the idea that a long time ago, Google started using information in our emails to market to us. And everyone's got a story of how they were talking with their friend and they mentioned this restaurant that they hadn't talked about in 2 years. And then all of a sudden they're browsing and they see ads for that restaurant, right? Because your phone is always listening. There's some app that you install on your phone. In the user agreement, it said, we're going to listen to what you're talking about, and we're going to show you ads. So there's this general skill that we all have to some degree, whether we trust a system with our personal information. AI factors really big into that, right? It's a big decision. In general, I can say that OpenAI, Claude, and Gemini, the three leading models out there, it's probably secure. Like, this is my opinion, right? It's probably secure to put your information, but that's a decision everyone has to make as far as, do they trust these companies? I know for a fact that Copilot from Microsoft, that AI builds a profile of your use and your interests and what you do and sends that information to Microsoft. So I don't use Copilot myself. I wouldn't enter in any personal information in the Copilot. But the other three that I mentioned don't, or at least it hasn't come out yet that they do. It's not part of their agreement that they do. But then there's this bigger thing going on, right? We know from our experience for decades using computers that when I send a document into a computer system, usually I can get a copy of that document out exactly as it was, right? When you send information to these models, to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, the same thing is not happening. It's not storing an exact copy of whatever you put in. It's not even storing an exact copy of what you say or do, with the exception of Copilot. What it's doing is breaking down the files or the pictures or the things you say into concepts, and it's remembering those concepts. So it's never going to be able to repeat word for word a document that you submitted a month ago, because it just doesn't store it that way. So in some ways, your personal information isn't getting stored. There isn't some big repository in OpenAI's company, I believe, not that I know of, that's got everyone's documents and everyone's pictures, because that stuff gets broken down into its concepts, and so it's like bits of meaning, and that gets stored, and it gets used to make the model better. So then what does that mean on the ground? When you're a user, either yourself or for a business, if you're using a free account, if you're not paying a monthly fee, almost certainly that company that's putting that model out is using your information to make their model better. It's not storing exact reproductions of your queries. It's not storing exact copies of your files, but it's using that information to make their model better. If you have a paid account, then it depends. OpenAI, for example, if you have a paid account, you're paying $20 a month, by default does not take that information. Your information is not taken and made to make the model better. Google, I think it still does, unless you tell it specifically not to. But you have to do your due diligence. Whatever model you find yourself using, read, ask, right? That's another thing. We talk about asking the hammer. How do I hammer nails in? You can ask the tool, do you capture my personal information? Is there a way that I can click on your interface to keep that from happening? For ChatGPT, there's a button in the top right-hand corner that says temporary chat. When you click that, the words temporary chat appear by the screen, and it won't remember anything that you're saying. It won't store that in any capacity. It'll just answer the questions that you're asking. And then when you click it again, that temporary chat's off. It's like an incognito window on a web browser.
Thank you, Pete. I see Jimmy is moving in to signal us that we're in our last 5 minutes. He probably wants to say a few concluding words, but I do have, Jimmy, I'm going to interrupt you before you interrupt me. I'm going to hold this space for 2 seconds. How do we learn more, Pete?
You can come to our website, Kuleana.work. You can go to our events page. You can come to our office hours. And if you're really eager to learn something, today at 5:30 p.m. until 7, we have a workshop called Learning to Chat with ChatGPT. It's total beginner, no knowledge necessary. You bring a laptop or your device, and we'll teach you some starter things.
Excellent, thank you.
We don't charge anything.
Yeah, there was a wonderful word you used before, free. Free to all of you. But also, just to acknowledge once again, free because of the generous support of the County of Kauai and the innovation grant that we received. That's why we can put on these workshops, offer the consulting hours, and be a resource to the business community on Kauai. And that's where we place our focus, and that's where we place our gratitude. So thank you to the County of Kauai for that.
And because I'm the president of this organization, I'm going to take 2 minutes. I attended their opening this past Saturday, I'm sorry. And I sat in the front row because I needed to learn the most of anybody there because I knew really nothing. I had bought the membership like 3 years ago when it first came out. I never used it once. So they gave me enough confidence that, over the weekend, I actually used it for the first time. And so I just started chatting. And so what I came up with after about 20 or 30 minutes, just in terms of things I learned that are appropriate for my business, I have SEO. Those have businesses. It's, to help people know to use your website for certain things. It taught me about SEO phrases. And I didn't know about SEO phrases. I thought it was individual words. So just that one thing was enough for me to tell my associate this morning, instead of listening to you all. And by the way, she said it was $25 now. So anyway, I just authorized it. So anyway, just go online, try it. And just in 15 or 20 minutes, you might find something that is you. And that was for free. Right. Okay. Anybody have any last minute urgent? By the way, I assume you're going to be willing to spend a few more minutes here afterwards talking story. Okay.
And Jimmy,
Yes.
can I just clarify one thing? Because you're referring to the monthly membership for the ChatGPT plan, the $25 plan, $20 to $25 now. So thank you for that, because any one of you might be using ChatGPT and you might be wondering, what is this membership you bought 2 years ago? So thank you for sharing that. And I also wanted to acknowledge you because you asked a wonderful question, and your humility as a business leader to say, I don't understand, or I feel dumb in relation to this technology. And if you're saying that, you're in good company, because the technology is changing every day. This is precisely the time to feel dumb and to feel like being dumb is an asset, because that allows you to say, hey, what can I learn from here? And your curiosity and your ability to play with this technology with good supporters around you will put you at the leading edge of whatever you want to do in the business community. So thank you.
One more thing I forgot. This came yesterday afternoon. Somebody wants me to help them buy a pretty good sized, large commercial property on this island, and they wanted me to provide them a letter of intent and LOI. And I certainly, I have many of those forms in my computer for use. I easily could have done it. I said, why don't I go try ChatGPT? And so I took, about a minute just to describe it, sent it, and back came an excellent LOI. Now, do the LOIs I have on my own computer, are they excellent? Yeah, I believe so. But a few things in the chat LOI that I didn't happen to have in the LOI I was using at that time. So I borrowed a couple of the items in the chat LOI. I added it into my master LOI form. And again, that took 5 minutes. Okay, with that, thank you very much to our speakers. And I'm going to call this meeting to an end, but they are willing to spend a little bit more time with you. Come on up. Thank you very much. Aloha.